remember watching Scary Movie. That was probably one of the first times I was introduced to the idea of horror. Yeah, it freaked me out. I had a TV in my bedroom, like at the foot of my bed, that was very similar to TV in the movie where this creepy girl crawled out of, and I was scared for life that that girl's gonna crawl out of my TV when I'm trying to go to sleep.
I have a friend, he was watching something like that with a group of friends. Stuff started flying across the room.
Wait, while watching the movie?
While watching like a horror like film. What attracts people to that kind of stuff? Do you ever watch anything that give you nightmares?
I say I hate horror movies, but actually sitting here talking with you guys, I think I've actually seen quite a few of them.
I think you've seen possibly more than me.
What? Yeah. See, that's the thing, though, is that I think you actually watch more horror movies than you realize.
You do.
Because not everybody wants to sit down and watch some like Scream movie. But then I remember watching Scary Movie. That was probably one of the first times I was introduced to the idea of horror. And I was like, yeah, in my mind, this wasn't a horror movie because it's based on a real horror movie, right? But it's like raw humor or comedy or something like that. But yeah, it freaked me out. I had a TV in my bedroom, like at the foot of my bed, that was very similar to TV in the movie where this creepy girl crawled out of, and I was scared for life that that girl's gonna crawl out of my TV when I'm trying to go to sleep.
I always say to my wife, it's like I don't have a lot of memories as a kid, but I have one very distinct memory. Being about 5 years old, Nightmare on Elm Street had just come out. It was in theaters.
Oh boy.
And the TV was on at our house. And I remember seeing the TV promotional for that. And of course, what sticks out in my mind are this hand from Freddy Krueger going up through the bed. And I think it was supposed to be of this girl or young person or something. It freaked me out. I'm 5 years old. You know? And I just remember so many times like thinking about what's under my bed as a kid after that. I mean, it messes with your head.
But you were 5?
I was 5 years old.
Dude.
It's funny how movies can shape like a whole culture. People are scared of sharks because of Jaws. And, people probably didn't think too much about the water before, but they had a huge swath of people that would just kill the sharks because even if they're not like super, super dangerous. So movies can affect, a lot of things.
I think my mom told me that when she was younger, maybe you guys remember this one, there was this movie about like birds, something like that, where just a bunch of birds came.
Like an Alfred Hitchcock.
Is that one?
I think so.
Yeah.
The birds.
They became like these predators and started eating humans and all these kind of things. So like every generation has had their shape or form of horror movies.
Yeah. Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, that's a very famous, shower scene that everybody's probably seen, the stabbing in the shower.
Of course. Of course.
Used to watch with of all people, with my parents. They were just into this, Tales from the Crypt, which was
HBO.
Actually based on a comic book series. And of course, HBO made it on TV. And then, I remember as a teenager being into like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, but probably mostly because, I thought there was a cute girl in it. And, that's what you're motivated as a young man.
That's the thing. They're going to show you some disgusting things where people are getting murdered. And then they make it this sort of seductive woman. That I think that's kind of rather disturbing, right? That you would actually be, excited as a young boy about somebody that's covered in blood. I think that's very disturbing.
When I was in my teens, I remember going to, it was like Pirate Bay or uTorrent or something like that. And you just like to download this movie off the internet. And I didn't tell my parents. I had a computer in my bedroom. So I was like, whatever, I'm just going to do this. I illegally downloaded the movie Saw because when back then you still had the DVDs and all that kind of stuff, and there was a music store in town, and I always saw those DVD covers like on display for everyone to see of Saw, of the various movies that they had, and it was like really gross looking, like a dude with a bunch of needles out of his head and weird things like that. I was curious, and so I downloaded Saw, and it was literally of a dude he was like imprisoned or something or trapped, and he knew his family was outside, and to get to his family he was in chains, so he had to cut his legs off and drag himself out of there to get to his family, and he had been driven to insanity. And I finished watching it and I thought, never again. Like that was so vile. And it was just, you see how much of an impact it has on you, right? Because how many movies do you remember the scenes of, but this kind of gory stuff is just in here forever.
It's disturbing. It really is. I mean, that's one of the reasons I could never watch stuff like Saw. Is it's just, it was so disturbing to think about cutting off your own leg or something to get out of something. But it's shocking as I sit back and reflect how much of that junk I watched. You know, a lot of it's crossover. Alien, all the Alien films. I mean, there's a lot of horrible stuff, scary stuff that happens in there. You have like the Blair Witch Project. You know, I remember watching that. Why? I have no idea. It's like, I look back and I wondered what attracts people to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think like anything, like you want to watch movies because of the way that they make you feel.
But I don't like being scared.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a strange thing that people want to feel these different emotions, but I think there's a danger of like revving up your fight or flight system and then not it doesn't do anything. Like you suppressed it. You're not getting up and running out of the theater. You're just sitting there watching these terrible things happen and eating popcorn and eating candy.
Do you know horror is the most divisive movie genre? It's split almost down the middle, like 25% in each section, like love it, hate it, you know, kind of love it, kind of hate it, across the board. It's almost even in each of those categories. It's really weird. So, and when you look at like movie making, typically horror films are more low budget, but they have the greatest returns. So there's also incentive for Hollywood to keep making them because they have very loyal audiences and they have great returns on them. It's like 400% generally.
I think there's a very weird real world things that happen when they're making horror films. You know, I have heard that there is kind of this common denominator where something really tragic actually happens. Like some of the more evil horror movies, the actors will die, something will happen on the set. Weird things when they made The Omen, like the plane with the writer and the director as they're coming over, or one of the actors gets struck by lightning, and three or four of the other cast members and people that were all flying to the location got struck by lightning in the plane. And you know, the plane can take some lightning, but that's just weird in general. I mean, I fly a lot. You fly a lot. Yeah. Have you ever been struck by lightning?
Never.
No.
But didn't you say it was like 3 different occasions that plane was struck or something like that?
And even in one of, I think, one of the scenes, the writer had written it in such a way that there was a helicopter crash and the helicopter killed the 2 boys that were in there and the actor. But what was really weird about it was the writer wrote that exact scene and it happened exactly like that scene. And he had written that prior to that thing happening. So
that's like Grant Morrison stuff.
I was about to say.
You know.
Can you tell more about that?
Well, he was writing in the comic books, and the stuff that he was writing was actually happening to him.
Yep.
In Grant's book, Super Gods, he says,
I came out in boils, a traditional sign of demon contact. I hallucinated something I recognized immediately as Christ. I understood that this power I was facing was some kind of Gnostic Christ, a Christ of the Apocrypha, and almost pagan figure that I'd found at the bottom, at the last gasp.
You know, I'd become the character. I was wearing the clothes, I was going to the places, I was doing the things, I was doing the rituals, I was hanging out with the gods, and then putting it back in the comic, and then being affected by what was in the comic. So yeah, I mean, in terms of reality, that one was the actual deal. You know, that one was bringing me to the verge of death.
When Grant was working on The Invisibles, he got sick right around the time that character got sick.
Just after King Mob had been convinced by the bad guys that he'd been given a necrotizing fasciitis bacteria that was eating through his face, I suddenly get this huge boil on my face, and within 3 days it's enormous, distorted my entire feature. I was sweating constantly, I was getting into fevers and having these like shakes and rigors and then freezing. I just couldn't get up anymore, and I lay in front of the fireplace in my house.
I mean, he thought he was going to die. I mean, he was broken down in tears, and he was delirious, man, delirious.
And suddenly this giant column of light comes through the door. I mean, bear in mind I'm hallucinating, but this was one of the most amazing hallucinations I've ever had. And it's Jesus. The first thing he said, which is the thing I put in the comic, just this voice suddenly announced itself I am not the God of your fathers, I am the hidden stone that breaks all hearts. So then he's saying to me, okay, you're about to die now, but you don't have to die. And I said, well, I really don't want to die. What do I have to do? And he said, well, if you want to stay here, you have to work for us. You know, you have to spread the...
Yeah. Well, also Andrew Bakinski, we just had him on our show. We have the episode on our channel. He was I would say he was pretty high up in Hollywood as a camera operator. Worked with Jude Law and what's the girl who was in the first Spider-Man movie?
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst. Yes. And he did like 4 days or something like that on the set of Steven Spielberg. Did some X-Cam for him. That was actually where Jude Law was as well. But he said that he had a friend who was working on a Hollywood horror movie. And that friend told him they actually had to bring in a priest to exorcise, like cast out demons off the set because there were so many strange things happening to people. People were getting hurt on the set, and they realized something really dark was actually going on.
Gregory Peck's son was going to be on a horror movie, and the very first day he ended up taking his own life.
Yeah.
You've got The Crow, where there was that crazy scene that Brandon Lee got shot with a real gun, and nobody knows which one it was, and it's wild.
I remember watching this show on MTV because I grew up on Nickelodeon and MTV. I did not grow up a Christian. There was this show about these girls that wanted to become Hollywood actresses. So they put them through all kinds of demonic things. And I remember specifically one of the things they made them do, and these were just like standard girls from the street, right, who just wanted to be famous. One of the things they made them do was to go outside, and I think they had some kind of a ritual outside, like with witches, and I'm pretty sure there might have been a pentagram involved, like weird things like that. And so again, why, if all you want to do is just be an actress in a horror movie and just act like you're scared, why do you have to go through all of those rituals in order to get there?
Yeah.
Didn't you say there was some like huge percentage return on those movies?
Yeah, like 400%.
400%. So that's based on like another film. Like films are usually, double or whatever.
Yeah, like more than action, more than drama. I mean, action was second most, but more than drama, more than comedy, more than any other genre.
So they're cheap to make, it's got a really good return. And so the incentive to me would be if that horror movie can do much better, you make more money. So it doesn't shock me that they would be doing ritualistic things to try to push everything out there.
So I know of, this never happened to me that I can remember or know of, like watching anything like that. But I have a friend, it's funny because his birthday is actually today. He was watching something like that with a group of friends. And he said it was the weirdest thing, like stuff started flying across the room.
Wait, while watching the movie?
While watching like a horror like film. Yeah.
So I never saw anything weird like that. And when I was younger, my brother and I, we kind of went through this phase where we didn't watch that stuff as kids. So I think we kind of overconsumed when we had the opportunity to make those choices ourselves. And so we would watch tons of those things. And yeah, I was scared, but I also think it really just numbed me to feeling empathetic towards people or things or whatever like that. I mean, how can that not have some sort of impact upon your psychology or your, care for other people? If you can sit there and eat popcorn and candy and watch people die, and you're getting enjoyment out of that.
It is kind of a weird phenomenon.
It is, yeah.
I can't remember specifically like connecting. I watched this movie and then this happened. But again, I didn't grow up a Christian, so in our house, we had music that was super satanic, like Hell's Bells, Highway to Hell. My dad was always playing that music. I was listening to classical rock, like AC/DC and all that kind of stuff. And then we read Harry Potter. My mom's from South Africa, so we brought back like African masks and things like that. So I think we had a lot of things around our house, including sometimes, watching those horror movies or other movies that were full of violence and gory things like that. That stuff was happening in our house, but I don't think the horror movies were the only avenue. I think they were one of the avenues. I remember specifically, I was about 12, 13 years old, that I felt myself levitating on my bed. And I would open my eyes and I still saw myself moving. Like I was like sideways and I was moving like this. And so I screamed, and as my dad came in, he was like, "Oh, you're just dreaming." I'm like, I was not dreaming. I had my eyes wide open. I felt my whole body moving. Different things like that. And it was only really after I became a Christian, got baptized, and people had come and actually prayed over our home, and I started getting rid of the stuff that I had and started changing what I was watching, that these things disappeared.
Yeah. When you touch on the Harry Potter stuff, which isn't like horror, but it's witchcraft.
It's dark.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Yeah.
There are places and words in those films they're used in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're real world places and they're real magic words that are used. It's not all just like play, not all made up.
Yeah, I think some of the names of the characters are actually real demon names.
Yeah.
I mean, she was writing, J.K. Rowling, or Rowling, however you say her name, she was writing a train when she saw Harry Potter. Like, what did you see? You were wide awake. What happened? It's yeah. And we actually, at the time of when we released this video, we actually have a video on our channel of a girl who starts seeing demons that had knives that wanted to attack her because she was involved with Harry Potter and all these things. So
That's
definitely
wild.
Interesting to check that out. Link in description.
So there's definitely crossover sometimes when you're watching stuff and supernatural events. There's also physical responses. I don't know if you guys, when I started investigating on this, I'm like, why do people keep going back? Because it seems like a lot of this stuff is the worst of humanity.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to see some human being do that to another human being? But there's physical responses. So like your body will release surges of epinephrine, and what that can do is cause your blood vessels, your arteries, to be damaged. And this is repeated exposure. It's not like it happens once. It's going to happen that way. I think God designs our system so that we respond to something naturally, but then if we keep artificially doing it, that's when we get in trouble, or we put ourselves at risk. So obviously we have this inborn or pseudo-natural, I call it pseudo-natural because I don't think we were ever truly made to be scared, but we have the response, right? So if we see something, we get scared, we respond to it. That appears to be natural. It's not going to be that way in heaven because there's nothing scary, but that's the way it is here on this earth. But if you have epinephrine being released in your system quite a bit, it can be also raising your blood pressure and giving you increased risk of heart attack and stroke. And a compound factor in all of that is when you're watching these kinds of things, it elevates your cortisol levels. When you elevate your cortisol levels, then it kind of inadvertently helps build up fat tissue. And so then, of course, we know if you're more predisposed to obesity or a sedentary lifestyle or all of that, then you start this vicious circle. You know what I mean? Because now you're building up these fat stores in your body, and then that also makes, generally the things that go with that increased risk of heart attack and stroke and things like that. So it just keeps kind of going. So if you keep going and watching those kind of things that are freaking you out, it kind of feeds itself, and that's not the best for your health.
I also just looked this up, that, and I assumed that this would happen, that you get an adrenaline hit because your body is trying to protect itself. Have you ever felt adrenaline go through your body?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You feel like this flush, right?
You can feel like when you're in a situation that you feel is either dangerous or I should not be here or whatever, and you feel your system kind of wake up.
I
and
know.
It's like, get ready to run if we have to.
Yeah, I feel like this, I don't know how you can say it, but like almost, like you can, if you had to visualize it, there's this thing that just comes over you, like it flushes over you because it just shoots through your whole body.
Right.
And that's addictive too.
Yeah.
And dopamine is the other thing that comes in. And it seems kind of counterintuitive, but people that actually watch a lot of horror and stuff, they get a hit of dopamine from watching all that stuff because they come off of all the scary, all the fight or flight or whatever. And there's this satisfactory response at the end, like, I'm still alive. I made it through. It's all okay. So you get this feel good release at the end of it. And that, of course, repeated exposure, build up, just like being on your phone, social media, other types of film genre. And you get addicted to it.
No, Dr. Neil Netley, he talks about addictions in his depression anxiety recovery program. I'm a volunteer in the program at our church. And so he talks about the effects of a dopamine when you have addictions, right? So he shows you this graph, and maybe I can even find his graph exactly, or look for something similar to show you. But he shows this graph, and basically this is like your steady line of dopamine.
Homeostasis.
Yes, homeostasis.
Your base.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says what happens is, let's sort of say, for example, you watch a horror movie and you get this dopamine hit, right? It goes up, but then it goes lower to where it was before. So now that's your bottom, like base basically. And then you do it again and it goes lower and lower and lower. And it actually can cause depression and anxiety because your dopamine base is so much lower and you feel like you have to keep going back to it to get your dopamine up. And so what happens in the beginning especially is now your dopamine hit, your high, is actually your previous base.
Yeah.
So, and that's extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
So you never actually get the same happiness or joy or satisfaction. But if you do healthy things, like let's say, for example, you get a dopamine hit because, I don't know, you
got a hug from somebody.
You get a hug from somebody. You actually, it stays up much longer and it's more consistent. It doesn't drop as easily.
Well, like anything, you're going to get addicted to that drug and you're going to keep coming back to the watering hole. So I'm sure they at least know that and they're going to push the envelope, which that's why I think things are getting sicker and more weird. And I mean, if you watch a horror movie from probably when we were kids, it's scary, but not like today's movies. Today's movies are just downright like absolutely scary.
And there's ways of measuring that. You know, you're probably, I know you're familiar with the term neuro-cinema. So the scariest movies by today's standards, I don't even recognize because I didn't see them, but you look at the statistics and they're like showing you what people's elevated heart rates are and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of fascinating, tracking eye movement, heart rate, different physical markers to measure, I mean, even fMRI brain scans to measure how somebody is responding to a piece of media. So have you found out anything interesting?
Well, when we kind of stumbled on that, we were looking and investigating like the different ways that they will do market research. How do they make this movie more exciting or more, because that's really what they're after, right? If they can give you a better emotional rush, you'll come back to the movie. Yeah. We saw that with like Titanic, right? People came back like 10 times and saw that movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there were some groups out of Stanford in California and around Davis and that would do what they call neuro-cinema, what you're describing here. And they're basically sending people in an fMRI machine and then showing clips of the movies and then checking, are their brains reacting to this in the way that we want? And if it wasn't, they would go back and they would recut it so that you would get this maximum amount of emotional rush to it. So it's like they're scientifically now figuring out how to give you that little dopamine hit. And what's scary is now compound that in today's world where it's like, I'm sure if you throw AI into that situation where it's like, now tell me the formula of how to make this the most scariest addictive movie, I'm sure AI is going to come up with some very disgusting things to drive this thing even further down the road. And so I think, it's time to get a handle on this now.
So I just looked up this too, about what happens to your brain since we're talking about it. So your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, instantly signals your hypothalamus, which flips on the body's fight or flight response. I think you and I weren't even working here yet. We didn't work in this documentary that he worked on, right? Okay, so you worked on a documentary called Pseudology, which means the art of lying, which is all about media and how it affects the brain. This is like way back in the heyday of when little studios came about. But what did you learn from science about the fight or flight system?
Well, it's a weird thing to scare you and get you ready to prepare to run or be active like that. That's like revving up the system. But then by suppressing it constantly, meaning you're not running out of the theater, you're not actually in any real danger. Yeah, it's like pulling the lever of making that rush come about you, and then each time that rush is going to significantly get less and less and less. Now, what if you have to actually run? What if you actually have to do something? I mean, you've kind of taxed that system. And so, they're after that. They want that because that's going to drive people to come and watch these things. And I think everybody that goes to watch horror movies, why would you want to sit in a room and watch somebody be dismembered?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a weird,
doesn't make sense.
It's a weird thing just to think about in general. Like, why are we attracted to that? Like Halloween, for example. Like, I just went camping this weekend, and it's like when we drove into the campground, there were things hanging from the trees from nooses, and it was like, why would they want to do that as a form of decoration or something? Or it's like, what if you had a family member that committed suicide? Would you not be offended driving into that campground and seeing somebody hung at the tree? You know, and it's like weird that we are fascinated by death.
You know, all the neuro-cinema stuff also spills over into what's called neuromarketing. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Campbell's Soup many years ago started changing their labels. And the way they were measuring that is an audience's emotional response to different elements on the soup labels. So, for example, they added steam because if there was steam, that indicated warmth, and people were more emotionally drawn to the warmth. They would like remove the spoon because people had no emotional attachment to it. So all these different elements, and the one thing that was always in common was people's emotional responses to the different things that are there graphically. And so it's fascinating the level of detail and the amount of money that's spent to study how we respond to different things. And basically at the end of the day, it's essentially biochemical manipulation.
And that's all has to do with your subconscious, right? You don't just go into the store and look at them like, man, I'm really emotionally responsive now to the steam.
You don't say those words, no.
You don't. You just look at the package and you're like, I really want some soup right now. You don't even know why you thought that. Like, you weren't planning to buy it, nothing. It's just something happened in your brain. And I think it's the same goes with the horror movies, right? It's all working on our subconscious, and you don't have much to say about it unless you just avoid it.
Well, bring that into the Christian realm. Now you have something that you're dealing with that's very supernatural. I mean, the Bible talks about demonic spirits and those kind of things, right? But you're watching these movies that do not enter into the conversation at all, how to overcome that or how to battle that, or God's not even a part of that picture. So they're resolving these demonic things outside of the realm of God having power over that demon. And so I think even in a subtle way, that's bending our belief that, like, hey, if I saw a demon, God needs to help me, protect me against that thing. And here we've watched all these movies that, like, you resolve it yourself. You have a bigger gun, you have a cross made out of wood or whatever like this, you stab them. I mean, it's just like outside of God.
Yeah. There's a lot of supernatural stuff that happens in horror films. And I don't just mean like it physically happens. It's depicted, right? Like they want to show that on screen. And all of that stuff, God told Israel a long time ago, like, don't go there.
Right.
Like, ever. Just don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And so the fact that we go and watch it and enjoy it is actually really strange.
We did an episode with David Ng. He's from Malaysia. And I would say he's an expert in demonic manifestations and like how to overcome demonic possession and all that kind of stuff, like casting it out. He's cast it out of many people. And he actually talked about that horror movies, many movies, but specifically horror movies, are an open door to the demonic realm and to ask them to come into your life. You have to give them permission, and that's what you're doing.
I don't think we're going to get to heaven and say, man, I wish I watched one more horror film. Or I'm so glad I watched that before I got here. Or I'm so upset that I missed the sequel to this other one. I don't think that will enter into our thinking at all, because heaven is a place of light and happiness and love and peace. Horror films don't give you any of that. So there's nothing there for us but emptiness. And when you think about it, most of the time, they're just depicting the absolute worst parts of our human nature, absolute worst parts of humanity. So for me, what I like what the Bible says. There's a scripture in Psalm 119. It says, turn away my eyes from looking at worthless things and revive me in your way. Psalm 119, verse 37. Those are worthless things. And the Bible's like, just don't even look at worthless things. They're not worth your time. They're not going to do anything for you.
There's a lot of physical evidence that what we watch impacts us. That's why we worked on that documentary called Pseudology, was really to prove we know this thing affects you. We know that you watch something and your body responds to it, and they can cause you to have an action over here. And so that's, I think, why Paul penned in Philippians, right? Whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's of good report, focus on these things, because if you do that, you set the mind on heavenly things, and you think about what an amazing thing that's going to be to go to heaven. And I don't think we talk about heaven enough. Yeah. And I think some of these things that just keep this darkness around us, it's like it makes you familiar with darkness. And the more familiar you are with those things, the more your mind will fall into those ruts. So do a Daniel challenge. Don't watch anything like that for an extended period of time and see how your body reacts to that. Yeah. Go through the holiday season. Don't watch one horror movie. Just watch something lovely and pure and see what that does to you.
Study your Bible.
Amen.
Study your Bible.
Yeah. I like what you said there, Keith, about in heaven it's light, right? 1 John 1:5 says, "This is the message which we have heard from him," meaning Jesus, "and declared to you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all." And, it just reminds me of, I believe we are very close to the second coming of Jesus, and we have to ask ourselves the question is the way we are living our life, are we preparing for that? Are our hearts really desiring to be in heaven? And are our actions showing that? Because out of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And you can by the fruits you shall know them. So if your life is revolved around, well, I want to watch all this darkness and stuff, and heaven is light, and in Jesus there is no darkness, then you really have to ask yourself, where are you headed? And I remember there's this story of, it's this idea that there's a train, and Satan is the train conductor. And the train is full of people who are just distracted, who are involved in worldliness, who don't even realize who the conductor is, but he is riding them straight toward destruction. And yeah, I think God wants us to wake up, because that's the fast track to death. And he wants to give us life, and he wants to give us hope and light. And we have an option. We can choose to get off the train and walk the narrow walk that Jesus wants us to. And I hope that when people hear that they will make that decision for Jesus, fill yourself with his light and his glory, right?
Oftentimes those things, that's what they're depicting more than anything else, is death. When God came, Jesus says, "I came that they might have life and have it more abundantly." So we need to get our priorities straight. And I look back at my own life and I'm like, none of that did. I've watched way more than I realized that I did. And it didn't do me any good. Didn't add anything to my life. In fact, it detracted from it. And, I have all those memories and I can't get rid of them.
That's right.